This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back for another episode of Hit the Road, Jack, Finding the Zodiac. Last week, we were covering some websites that were made up in regards to evidence that I've put out there in this case, including the handwriting examination. And we kind of left off talking about handwriting that was a match. We had the letter A's that came out of this new communication that were consistent as well with Jack's handwriting. Of course, we know that it matched the Zodiac's handwriting after putting it up side by side to the 1986 letter. But last week, obviously, we saw science win with a handwriting match in those letter A's. More evidence that the hood is being portrayed incorrectly by mass media. And of course, we addressed some unfounded accusations of cherry picking by the experts in the so-called internet world of these Zodiac cases. I wanted to kind of just follow up on a little bit of that just because last but not least, at least in that segment of that website that was created to discredit me, that Voight and crew claims I have no idea what I'm talking about as a forensic examiner in regards to the handwriting identification that I show on YouTube, which it's a very old presentation. It has a lot of handwriting that's included on it, but it was my first experience with actually recording and talking about handwriting, which may not have been the most smoothest or flowing presentation that I've ever given in handwriting. Of course, in court, you're being asked questions, so you're explaining them as you're being asked. In that particular case, I just kind of did a straight run through from A to Z, all of the punctuation and diagrams and things that I found that were consistent with Jack's handwriting. But what we don't see when they say that I don't know what I'm talking about as a forensic examiner is we don't see them actually addressing the handwriting. This is something that's not been a new phenomenon, let's say, because ever since I came into this case and started discussing handwriting in regards to Jack Tarrant's matching the Zodiac Killer, we've had people come out and say it was snake oil. I was a snake oil salesman. I was this, that, or the other, which is really what I refer to as the ad hominem argument. And if you don't know what an ad hominem argument is, it's an argument that's, instead of being fact or evidence based, they're beating up on the person. So when I go into court, I am not allowed to have an opinion about an opposing examiner that might be there to testify in the case. I can only have an opinion on the work that they did. So I am only allowed to refute or rebut their testimony based on the evidence that they are submitting themselves. Not that I know that they lied or that they fraudulently created a report in favor of a client, or that I believe that they are unethical or immoral. I'm not allowed to say these kind of things. So on the internet, of course, it's a free-for-all, and Voight and crew can say whatever they want to say about me, but what they never do is back that up with any fact or evidence base. And the ad hominem argument is literally appealing to one's prejudice, emotions, or special interests rather than to one's reason, attacking an opponent's character rather than answering an argument. So that really leads me to that handwriting examination that I did, which is still a really darn good presentation, albeit it could probably be made a little bit better. Either way, I just wanted you to know that when you're looking up on the internet and you come across my name, which you could not Google before this case, before the Zodiac case, you could not Google and probably find but one or two links on me. And you almost had to actually enter in my name to even find me. But once I entered the realm of the Zodiac, boy, they started creating websites and links and pages and blogs and things that it was 17 pages of links deep, and probably even bigger now at this point. I try not to Google myself. Either way, not once in that entire time that these people have presented all of their information as to whether or not Jack is the Zodiac. In fact, they're usually trying to say he's not. They've never once addressed the handwriting. They've never came in and said, this is different because this makes it not him, because we've never had anybody actually do that. And that's what I've welcomed for people to come in. Please comment, please make statements. If you think I'm wrong in the handwriting somewhere, you need to state your case and not just merely say I'm wrong. So last week's cover of that particular website and the unfounded accusations, I'm hoping that we have completely cleared that up. But Voight and Crew complaints really amount to nothing more than typos, as they call outright lies, cherry picking where there is none, and arguments about everything except for the handwriting evidence that I've put forth. So we're going to get into, and I'm not sure if everybody has this issue, but I will from time to time find that somebody has posted a comment on YouTube, and I'll go back to find it and I cannot find it. And I don't know if that means the person posted it really quick and took it down, but we spoke last week about Mr. JSV 650 and his inclination to be interested in, I think it was knives, guns, and watches. And of course, I came back this last week and found this new one that said, "Happy holidays, Nanette." Well, happy holidays, Mr. JSV 650, but I can't find your message to respond to it anymore. So we left off with some additional research that I found, which was Earl Van Best Jr. I talked about him being a false suspect not too long ago. I made an assertion that I believed that the handwriting that was used to make that identification was a document that the public does not fill out. It was a marriage certificate, and I had believed, based on previous experience and others, that that marriage certificate would have been filled out by the ordaining minister, whoever it was that handled the marriage, not necessarily the individuals. Now, the individuals would have signed it once it was completed and done, but I believe to be safe and make sure that things are accurate, that the minister is required to fill that out. So I was doing some research and stumbled across an article in regards to it. So the handwriting that was used by Mike Waxall in the Earl Van Best Jr. false handwriting identification, which the examiner actually tags at the bottom of his email as an identification, is false Zodiac suspect's handwriting. So it turns out to be the handwriting of Reverend Edward Fligger, just like I had thought. So I found this article here, in which case somebody from the actual church has basically backed up my assertion that the marriage certificate was not filled out by Earl Van Best. So I don't know who the identification is being stated as being made now, or if this Waxall character believes that the Zodiac was actually a priest. Either way, that was some cleanup. Now I'm gonna move through the Zodiac era fairly quickly once we get started, since the handwriting has already been confirmed as Jack's. And I do plan on doing an overall presentation of all the handwriting at the end. So bear with me. We're just going to move on through Jack's information. And we're going to move on through the communications, the solves that Harriet Suchet has found, and make our way through this 1968-69 era fairly quickly. I did want to back up, though. At one point, we had talked about some information in regards to Dennis Kaufman's book. And there was one last entry that I really wanted to kind of throw out there for everybody. And it's basically the story. It's over here on this right-hand side. We haven't covered it yet. But basically, in 1979, when Dennis and family left Austin, Texas to move back to Sacramento, they were loaded into the back of the truck, as to what Dennis describes a 2-foot by 2-foot area. It was just a small space in the back for my 2 younger sisters and myself to fit. Jack, Mom, and Charles, which is now Jack's and Nora's son, is riding up front. The truck had a camper shell on it, and we pulled a 19-foot travel trailer behind us. There was a door on the back of the camper shell that was left propped open. After we had been on the road for a couple hours, my 2 younger sisters and I started getting sick. I knew that we were breathing the fumes that were coming in through the door that was propped up. With our trailer directly behind us, the exhaust came right into the camper shell. We only had about 2 feet of space in the very back of the truck. I had no way to let them in the cab know that we were getting sick, so I figured something out, and fast. I started digging through our stuff and found a garden hose. I cut 3 pieces, and each piece was approximately 3 feet in length. We each put one end of the hose out the back and off to the side, and that's what we breathed through. Looking back, I think Jack planned to kill us, and it would have looked like it was just an accident. People would have even felt sorry for him because he had just lost 3 children, and all he would have had to do was act like he was upset about losing his children. He didn't need us anymore to look like he was a family man. He had his real son that was just a couple months old in the cab of the truck. I don't think that we would be here today if it weren't for that garden hose. So that's just another one of those instances where Dennis felt like Jack was not treating the family or the extended family as the family that he actually cared for. And that was kind of sad to hear. I mean, most people would know and understand about the fumes that were climbing back up inside of the truck like that. And either way, that's just another one of those dastardly things that Dennis felt like Jack might have been responsible for. So we did back up a little bit even further because I blew past this particular slide, not really realizing what it was that I was wanting to bring up. And that was the fact that Barry Walker Terrence, which was Jack's son, I believe he died at the age of 28. I believe it was an alcohol-related accident, and that is when Jack stopped drinking. I guess he got sober at this point, at least for some time period, because he did end up returning to drinking at some point in time. But I skipped right over the fact that in Dennis's book, when he was speaking to his cousin Gary, he mentioned that Jack had converted an old school bus into a motorhome in the late 60s. I asked Gary what type of gun Jack had back then, and the one pistol that he remembered was a .45 caliber. Now, I believe that Hartnell described a .45 caliber as the type of gun that was being carried on the hip of the Zodiac Killer when they were attacked. He also remembered hearing Jack and his son Barry talking about this girl they had picked up hitchhiking. They picked her up in a truck and camper and had pulled off the road somewhere and took her into the camper and raped her. This made me wonder if Barry knew who his dad was or maybe even helped. Barry died in 1981. Jack does have another biological son named Dennis, and he is still living. When I briefly mentioned the possibility of his dad being the Zodiac, his reaction led me to believe that he may know who his dad is, or at least that he has committed murder. And that wouldn't shock me. I mean, we were going to see some things by Dennis Denny that indicated that hunting humans was something that Jack would enjoy. So beyond that, of course, we had the no address letter that came in during that time frame, which kind of backs up the converted bus that Gary was talking about. So some of his stories can be tracked back to some truth that is consistent with what we know is going on with the Zodiac. And of course, we did show this back in 1963, which is the article talking about that converted bus that is owned by his sister and Jack's sister and Jack's brother-in-law. Now that puts us into one of the first murders back in California in 1968. It's August 27th of 1968. It's a casino owner that is killed, and his partner O'Malia is basically this is basically a mob-related hit. It did show that let's see here, South Lake Tahoe, Nevada gambling casino owner Richard Chartrand was killed Tuesday with a bomb demolished his automobile as he was leaving his home nearby Zephyr Cove. The blast, which shattered debris for more than 100 yards, occurred directly across the street from the then home of Frank Johnson, chairman of the Nevada Gaming Contractors Board, investigative arm of the state gaming control system. Sorry, you guys, this article is cut off in some areas. Chartrand, major owner of Barney's Casino in State Line and part owner of the Nugget Club in South Lake Tahoe, was killed instantly. Douglas County Sheriff's deputies said, I was in bed trying to get rid of a cold when I heard a tremendous loud blast, Johnson said. I even came out immediately. The car was smoking and Chartrand was lying in the front seat. So the FBI was actually called into the case, and Ted Stokes, acting district attorney of Douglas County, took over the investigation. He said he had called in the FBI as well as a bomb squad from Reno. Chartrand was a graduate of Fresno State College and served as a pilot in the Army Corps during World War II. So we have another pilot. Like, these pilots, I don't know what's going on. The mob knows a lot of them, evidently. We had operated an air charter service in Fresno and was a real estate broker there before moving to Nevada 5 years ago, where he assumed control of Barney's Club after a long dispute with other stockholders. And of course, I did find that there was a court case between Chartrand and Barney's Club. I didn't actually follow it up, but I did put the URL up here on the presentation so somebody could take a look at it if they wanted to. Either way, it looked like that they were literally just trying to squeeze him out, and he had borrowed money from the mafia to purchase Barney's Club and eventually gained the majority share with 25.5 shares. Now, he also owned the Nugget Casino. As I said, it was a part owner, acquired from Milo Sharky Begovich, which is, again, mob related. So car bomb on a timer, South Lake Tahoe, really kind of perked up my ears when I started reading about this particular murder. It doesn't necessarily mean that Jack committed it, but of course, having the bomb aspect, the time aspect, and South Lake Tahoe, which we know that Jack eventually moves into and that Don Alasko's moving from, is really what kind of made me take a look at this particular case. Now, I do show that there was also a hidden safe that was found at one point in time. And it's interesting because while the information that I initially gleaned from the articles on the internet indicated that he had borrowed money from the mob and that he had been he was not able to pay this money back, which is likely why they would take a hit out on you. All of a sudden, you start seeing these new articles that are coming up, such as the one that I have here, which is talking about the safe that was found. But then it says no one could figure out why Chartrand had been assassinated. Some people say he was part of the mob. Others say it was a disgruntled employee. And there are even some who say it was an accident. So they're literally just trying to bifurcate any existence of the mob inside of this particular murder, which to me, it just reeks and screams of the mob. Now, these are the individuals up here, Soper, Purcelli, and Ballard, which is what I found on the internet, and these are the number one suspects in the case. Though we see in many cases that their number one suspects literally kind of do not fit the bill, and who knows, these individuals could have been the one that completed this, or this could have been another hit that Jack had. We know that Jack was in Nyack, California in 1968, and that is really kind of just a hop, skip, and a jump, maybe 35 minutes or so around the bend, and you're into North Lake Tahoe. Jack's working as a tow truck driver, so a tow truck driver or a tow truck being seen in a neighborhood would not be something suspicious. They would just have believed that somebody had broken down and they were there to deliver the car, backing it into the driveway, what have you. So it might have explained why his presence at that particular point in time was not questioned. Now, we know that Don Alasko is missing in South Lake Tahoe in 1970, and the Zodiac Killer expressed using a bomb. So time has always been a theme for Zodiac and Jack, and the diagram should be compared to the parts, if any, from this bomb, if there was anything left. Take a look at it and do a comparison. We did find that the Douglas County Sheriff's Office believed two men, Roy Fred Purcelli and Louis Glenn Ballard, carried out the crimes. Purcelli, 50, and Ballard, 54 at the time, were crime partners who both had served prison time in the 1950s for conspiracy to smuggle. In their case, parrots, across the Mexico border, they were I guess they were trafficking parrots across the Mexico border into Southern California. That doesn't sound like a huge criminal activity to turn to blowing people up. I mean, how do you go from trafficking birds to being a murderer? I'm not sure, but they were thieves with expertise in robbing safes and thus adept in using explosives. Now, I don't know how many people are using explosives to break into safes, but it seems to me like that would draw an awful lot of attention if you were a burglar, if you were robbing a place, because a bomb blast could be heard for quite some quite an area, obviously. The two ex-cons allegedly killed and robbed Chartrand for Irwin Bud Spencer Soper Jr. in exchange for essentially $1,000. So purportedly, Soper is, well, at the time, Soper Jr., co-owner of the Montgomery Pass Lodge and Casino in Mineral County, and was about to open in the next 6 months the Monte Carlo Resort in Laughlin, both in Nevada. Obviously, there's a good chance, and I don't know what the beef was between these two people, or if Soper was the person that Chartrand actually owed money to for the casinos. But again, we have a casino owner they're now accusing of calling out this hit, and these two individuals. But Jack is frequenting Vallejo. Oh, that's a research question. Never mind. So the laundry and the research just continues, because as I go back into it, it just gets even more stranger as I start to look at some of the other information that was put in here, including about the safe. So it says that this particular case went cold, and in 1969, Barney's Casino in South Lake Tahoe Nugget offered a reward of $5,000 to whoever could offer any information or explanation for the assassination. There was no discernible motive. He had never been married. He had no apparent connections to the mob. Again, we now see there's no connections to the mob. And he wasn't in a huge amount of debt for gambling. Okay, so he's a gambler who then turns around and moves to South Lake Tahoe to purchase casinos. And he purportedly borrows this money from the mob and then literally has no debt. They say not mob related. They say like everything is now trying to just wean away that whole mob aspect. But I did actually, and it did say in a bizarre twist, the rights to the reveal of the safe were given to none other than TV star Oprah Winfrey. Now, that kind of shocked me. So the rights to actually film the opening of this particular safe, which is mob related, is then granted to Hollyweird or to Oprah, which I kind of, that was a little off-putting, made me a little sad, but I kind of hear that she is up in that upper echelon or group of individuals that is making money off of things just like this. So a Douglas County Sheriff's Office investigator was present during the opening of the safe in September of 2011, but would only state that there was nothing inside relevant to the investigation. So here she is ready to film the opening of the safe, but nobody gets to see what's inside. And then they state that nothing was relevant to the actual investigation. So what does that mean? That we don't have the right to know what was in that safe? I mean, I think that there's a possibility that, as stated in some of these articles, that Chartrand was skimming off the top of one of the casinos, and that upset, I think, Soper, and Soper was supposed to be receiving a portion of that skimmed money off of the top, and when he failed or stopped getting that money, that's when that particular hit was purportedly issued. We did have somebody who commented at the end of this article. Glenda Peden said, "I worked for Lou Chartrand Sr. He was a very kind and respectful man to me. He gave me a paperback copy of The Godfather and told me to read it and believe it." I believe it, honestly, yes. But he also told me his son had been blown up by the mob. So if he believes his own son was blown up by the mob, then there is probably a good chance that most of the rhetoric that we're reading about is actually mob related in that particular case. And that does kind of fall back into the lap of Jack Terrence, because I think I've shown enough relation to the mob in many of these aspects that are occurring. And that brings us actually to the Zodiac's first known set of killings, because like I said, I do believe that there are many more. I did pull this map up. Let's see if we can see here. I know that it's a little hard, but I'm going to put it up on the presentation at a later time. But what we see here is this map that was found inside of Sandy Betts, I think either in her car or on her porch. I'm going to have to follow up with her and find out. But it literally lists a series of murders. I'm not exactly sure what the count is on it overall. I believe that I've almost identified all of the murders. So basically where you can see the red information highlighted on there, we can actually see that these, and there's still a few murders that I need to find some or find out, because there appears to be 7 in Antioch, which I know that Sandy Betts is aware of who those 7 are. I am not aware myself, but need to come back and fill some of those out and figure out what the tally is on this particular map that was left in her car. Because if she's not being taunted by the Zodiac, she's being taunted by somebody who is familiar with what the Zodiac has been doing, and they are literally keeping her kind of at bay, or at least attempting to scare her or intimidate her, because she was very outspoken in regards to the murder of Darlene Ferrin, which she had worked with. So we'll get into that story a little bit later with Darlene. But I just wanted to show you that map, because these 2 people are actually on this map as it is laid out. And this is the December 20th, 1968 killings of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. This was done at Lake Herman Road on a Lover's Lane. So we have that follow up to the Lover's Lane, which was Texarkana Phantom murder, the Florida murder in Dania Beach. And so this kind of just is another tie-in to those Lover Lane murders. Now, these individuals were shot to death. They are, as it's indicated here. We will see that as we go through the presentation, which ones are on what I call the murder map from Sandy Betts. And a .22 casing on the floorboard of the car was found. The car was brown and shaped like a Corvair. Basically, I found that to actually be not necessarily the vehicle that was cited in the case by a couple witnesses that happened to be in the area at the time. But there was, let's see how it did that. 26 to 30, no, okay. Oh, go backwards. I had information in here that does not belong. Witnesses who witnessed if both were dead. Oh, yeah, so I had some information in there that was not part of this particular case, but some of the evidence is showing that bullets from Faraday's body, there was 2 bullets from Jensen's body, bullet found in the panties of Jensen. There were 5 Super X 22 cartridge cases found at the scene by the coroner, and there are 4 Super X 22 cartridge cases found at the scene by Sergeant Silva. 1 bullet found on the top of the 1961 Rambler that they were driving, and 1 bullet found in the floor mat left side storage area of the 1961 Rambler. 1 bullet found on the ground near Jensen's body, and the purple dress of Jensen. All of this information, or all of this evidence, was turned over in this case. I see shells, recovered bullets. So basically, I actually made a trip out to Lake Herman Road to kind of see what was out there, aside from the area that where the kids were actually killed. I kind of took a drive down the road, and there's this nice little bend that comes in. Right at the end of this bend down here is the Lake Herman Recreation Area, which I also found a payphone. Now, I did not find any information. I do need to go back to the FOIA files to see if there were any phone calls made in regards to this particular homicide, which there probably is. But this obviously would have been a great location for that to have happened. The 1968 map of Hogan High School in Vallejo, which is where they were supposed to be going, and they sidetracked themselves, went to and had some food, visited a friend, and then of course drove out to Lake Herman Road. I had surmised before actually figuring out or finding the information that supported they had actually taken a road that was originally Columbus Parkway that turns into Lake Herman Road. And in essence, they would basically pass right by this particular recreation area, which would be off to their right-hand side as they drove past, and ended up at the location on Lake Herman Road where they were killed. Graysmith's book indicates that the kids took a right onto Lake Herman Road off of Columbus Parkway, which means that they would have passed that rest area. So more information supporting the direction that they came in. And then Jack, sitting in that little makeshift bus or what have you, could have literally just been sitting there waiting for somebody to come by, knowing that the road was so isolated and so desolate that there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of traffic, but if there was traffic, they were probably out there up to no good and going to the Lover's Lane. Now, Graysmith keeps referring to the stocky man in this crime, and that's where I got that information. Some of the information I'm getting from Graysmith's book, some of the information I'm getting from the internet. The bottom line is that how does Graysmith know to keep referring to a stocky man in this particular instance when both of these victims died? Now, I don't know if this is the sightings from the individuals that happen to be out there hunting, or the there was a couple different people, one that had a home not too far from the place that had seen a vehicle, but I don't know or did not find any information that suggested they had actually witnessed or saw the individual in that vehicle. So basically, this is what that particular area looked like where they were killed back in 1968. Now, this is what it looks like today. Of course, it's been cordoned off. If you go around, so basically your recreation area is going to be over to the right hand side over here, like I said, down around that bend. But when you walk out the back side of the recreation area, there is a lake, and that lake actually borders right beyond these hills right here. So one could hike around. You cannot drive around, but you could hike around that particular area and come around the lake and come in on this back side of the actual gate. And that's the lake itself right there. Of course, people have come in and they've just, decided to tag everything with Zodiac signs. I didn't see a lot of, I didn't see anything interesting. And of course, over the time, the area has changed, obviously. The top two right pictures are of the area today. Around the bend on this stretch of the road on the left is the recreation area. Perfect. Yes. Okay. Got that. Now, this is what Wikipedia says about these attacks. The first murders widely attributed to the Zodiac Killer were the shootings of high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday on December 20th, 1968 on Lake Herman Road, just inside of Benicia city limits. The couple were on their first date and planned to attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School, about 3 blocks from Jensen's home. The couple instead visited a friend before stopping at a local restaurant and then driving out on Lake Herman Road. At about 10:15 p.m., Faraday parked his mother's Rambler in a gravel turnout, which was a well-known Lover's Lane. Shortly after 11 p.m., their bodies were found by Stella Borges, who lived nearby. The Solano County Sheriff's Department investigated the crime, but no leads developed. Utilizing available forensic data, we're going to love this, Robert Graysmith postulated that another car pulled into the turnout just prior to 11 p.m. and parked beside the couple. The killer apparently exited the second car and walked toward the Rambler, possibly ordering the couple out of the Rambler. Jensen appeared to have exited the car first, yet when Faraday was halfway out, the killer apparently shot Faraday in the head. Fleeing from the killer, Jensen was gunned down 28 feet from the car with 5 shots through her back, and then the killer drove off. Robert Graysmith's book indicates that 2 raccoon hunters, okay, so these are your witnesses, witnessed a 1960 white Chevy Impala 4-door hardtop. Another couple had a strange experience with a possible blue Valiant. Second sighting of the Impala by a sheep herder claims a J.C. Higgins Model 80 or High Standard Model 101. By sheep herder. That statement's going not by the sheep herder, but there were claims that a J.C. Higgins Model 80 or High Standard Model 101 bullets Super X copper coated with long rifle by Western just recently sold as early as 1967. So these were new bullets that were on the market. Bullets has a right hand twist, clockwise twist with 6 lands and grooves, called a 6 and 6. So to compare to other reports, I've added that information to this particular presentation. Here are some of the crime scene photos. Of course, we've got Jensen up here at the top, and we have Faraday at the bottom. The shooting behind the right ear, again, we've seen this talked about, obviously, with Stuart Mayer in San Francisco, Officer Tibbetts in Dallas, Texas, and Paul Stein in San Francisco as well. So this style of shooting, again, very mob-like, seems to be consistent with this particular killer. This was additional crime scene footage of the particular vehicle and the area, of course, the blood spot from one of the victims. Now that brings us to the actual bullets themselves, because Stephen Dewhurst did a pretty decent job at obtaining two weapons that would be the J.C. Higgins model and the Remington 572 lightweight. Now, we'll show you those guns here in a couple minutes, but the bigger question has been, because in Graysmith's book, it says, in addition to subjecting to further tests any J.C. Higgins Model 80 automatic pistol recovered, further tests should be made on any weapons having the following characteristics. So they're saying in addition to. So they're not saying that J.C. Higgins is the hardline, this is the gun that actually committed these murders, but that there's any particular model. It says that the cartridge cases had a semicircular firing pin impression at 12 o'clock position, small extractor markings at 3 o'clock position, and very faint ejector markings at 8 o'clock position. Latter may not always be detectable, meaning the ejector markings. The weapon barrel or test bullets, 6 right-hand grooves, land and groove ratio 1:1, bullet groove with approximately 0.056 inches, and bullet land width approximately 0.060 inches. Now, when I looked at these, and of course this is the test that Stephen Dewhurst did, he did this one with the 572, and he did this test with the J.C. Higgins. And one of the things that I noticed is that this particular marking that's occurring here is actually square in shape and not rounded, as this particular firing pin impression is. So when we looked at the differences here, this was more consistent with the 572 lightweight, as he had indicated, certainly nowhere near as circular or rounded looking as this particular one out of the J.C. Higgins Model 80. So basically down here, this is the gun that's circled in red, the rifle that of course then has the more square shape that is occurring in that particular firing pin location. Definitely the visual inspection of it would show or support that it was not a semicircular firing pin, that it was a square firing pin. So the Remington 572 .22 rifle pump action was accurate, lightweight, easy to handle, and quiet. And of course, since we have no witnesses as to what they were shot with out there, we could only assume. But I did find that the test that Stephen Dewhurst did on these guns extremely interesting. Let's see, the top rifle in the picture below could very well be the murder weapon used to kill David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. This is the same gun that Jack hunted with at night in 1974. He had a flashlight that mounted on top of the gun. And of course, we have heard from some of the survivors that they were blinded by a flashlight. And we hear or see the Zodiac talk about a flashlight mounted to the top of his gun. It is a .22 pump action, and it would appear to be a semi-auto, judging it from the shell casings left behind. It ejects the spent casings every time you pump another shell into the chamber. So that would make sense as to why there were so many casings left behind. Now, of course, the J.C. Higgins had this particular, it was sold in the Sears Roebuck, which is pretty much the research that I found out. Let's see, the firearm identified as the likely murder weapon at Lake Herman Road, they said likely, but they're not saying that it was a J.C. Higgins 80 pistol. The Sears and Roebuck and Company specialized in sporting goods and recreational equipment between 1908 and 1962, with the Sears J.C. Higgins eventually replaced with the Ted Williams brand. Sears Roebuck and Company manufactured their own paper targets throughout the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. the very targets a youth Zodiac may have used. The following targets suggest for best results with the 22 long rifle. So yeah, we're at least, and the insignia, though I'm not exactly sure, again, if it is meant by Zodiac Jack to be a gun sight. I do not find the astrological signs. I think that was just another ploy to kind of deter the public looking in another area. The cult, the other, conspiracies they want to throw in the middle of it to kind of confuse things. But that is a very good image of what we see the Zodiac doing with it. And he may very well have adopted that sign based on the type of gun he was using and the 22 long rifle bullets. All of that stuff plays quite nicely into it. But a gun sight was one of my initial thoughts in regards to it before I found out about the hypnosis that Jack was involved with. Which brings us to the hypnosis. So in Dennis's book, we show that Jack had what he referred to as a pendulum below, is what Jack used during his hypnosis practicing. I just thought it was interesting because it looks like the Zodiac symbol. He held a penny attached to a string directly over the pendulum, and he would ask himself a question, and the direction the penny would move would be a certain answer. So if it moved counterclockwise, it said, "I don't want to answer." If it moved clockwise, "I don't know." If it hung, and I'm not sure how this works because I'm not into hypnosis or anything, but there are directions it could go in, maybe swinging back and forth or left to right as a no or a yes. Either way, we know that this particular diagram was found in Jack's belongings, but we also know that this is Jack's handwriting over here, where he has recreated the same exact thing. So maybe he did not have access to his paper version, and he decided he needed to have some answers about something. So he jotted down really quickly. And again, we look at it, it's definitely the Zodiac symbol. And of course, in his, which looks a little more in depth, we have things that say counterclockwise, don't know, don't want to know, yes and no. So it is just a bit different. I don't want to answer and don't want to know. Those are two different statements there, but interesting that Jack has one in his own handwriting. Now, I just kind of briefly put together a timeline on this as well, kind of a follow-up to some of the things that we have looked about or heard already. And one of the research pieces I found was an article that was written on April 7th of 2004. Files shut on Zodiac's deadly trail. SFPD caseload renders a 35-year mystery inactive. So they discontinued, just as we were being told in those emails by Sad Badge, that SFPD had in fact discontinued any investigating in the Zodiac case, which is extremely interesting since Jack became a hot topic in 2000 with the FBI. They were trying to get the DNA done on him in 2001. We have him let's start here. 2000, Dennis Kaufman reports Jack to the FBI. 2000, SFPD Kelly Carroll finds out about Jack with a DNA request. And in 2000, Dennis goes straight to Jack to get answers. In 2001, Jack now writes a greeting card, Harriet Suchet says, calling out Tom Voigt for his treatment of Dennis, which is coinciding with the time frame, so it does make sense. And in 2001, more greeting cards are mailed to a senator, which carries similar messages. And in 2002, Zodiac writes Tom Voigt directly. 2002, the DNA done on 8 suspects by 20 on 20, and we were told that Jack was not included because they knew the other 8 were not the Zodiac Killer. In 2003, Zodiac writes Tom Voigt again. And in 2004, the SFPD closes the Zodiac Killer case. And by 2005, and I'm not sure, this could have been anywhere from 2003 to 2005, all rights and media inquiries are funneled to Tom Voigt, including him carrying the perpetuity of royalties on images for these crimes worldwide. And then in 2005, Zodiac writes Tim Miller asking why no one knows who he is since he gave proof of his identity. So if you follow the letters and the communications, you get yourself this nice little story that wraps itself up with they very well knew who he was by 2005, and he is complaining to Tim Miller that he has outed himself, but still he has not been identified as that perpetrator, and that he is also admitting to killing Tim Miller's daughter. And 7:44. Okay, well, that brings us to an interesting, and I'm going to just go ahead and start this, though I didn't think we'd get to next week. I wanted to read an article that was written in regards to Robert Graysmith, because we're going to basically blow out of the water, even though I'm going to actually or actively be using some of the information, because we do know that Robert Graysmith obtained good information from police departments and from witnesses and from victims in his book, that there is information we can use. Again, we just have to sort that information out. And some of the reasons, long before this article, I had already believed that there was something nefarious going on with Graysmith in this particular instance, probably because he sold millions of books and did not give anything to any of the family members of the victims or anything like that. But literally, I want to say that he sold 4 million. One of the items that I read was 4 million books in one particular case, but I'm sure he sold more than that. And everybody touts him as the albeit high and mighty individual that knows all the information about the Zodiac cases, although we know that Tom Voight has taken that reign over. This particular article really kind of lets you know, and it's the only one it says. So we're going to start here. Graysmith's 2 books about this still uncovered case have been widely discredited by critics, researchers, investigators, witnesses, and others. Yet his largely fictional accounts have served as the basis for a new major motion picture directed by David Fincher. That's the one that blows my mind. As the cartoonist turned crime writer is immortalized on film, audiences are entitled to know the true story behind the career and character of a Zodiac scavenger. So this particular article is calling Robert Graysmith a Zodiac scavenger. He is making money off of other people's losses. When the Zodiac crimes first began in the late 1960s, Robert Graysmith was a political cartoonist employed at the San Francisco Chronicle. The killer, who called himself the Zodiac, sent many letters to the Chronicle from 1969 to 1974. Graysmith was not involved in the case or the investigation. By 1976, Graysmith obtained a copyright for his own book about the Zodiac case. In December of 1980, Graysmith had said that his book would be published by Norton and available in 1981. The last entries in Graysmith's book are dated around this time. In 1983, columnist Herb Caen wrote an article stating that Graysmith's book, then titled "This is the Zodiac Speaking," would be published by St. Martin's Press and available in the fall of that year. It would be three more years before the book, and this, I might need to do a cross-referencing on that particular time frame, 81, 82, 83, in regards to the Herb Caen fake, they wanted to call them fake letters, but I do see that the Zodiac did actually write Herb Caen at least once. I believe that the second one is likely as well from the Zodiac. But to look at the time frame and determine if that coincides with the announcement by Herb Caen that this book is coming out, because that would have been the perfect opportunity for the Zodiac to lash out, reach out and say, you've got the wrong story, you've got the wrong person, or you've got something wrong. And that may have been why he wrote Herb Caen. Either way, it would be 3 more years before the book appeared with the title Zodiac. When released in 1986, Zodiac was a bestseller and became known as the definitive account of the case. However, Graysmith's story of the Zodiac's murders, methods, and motives was incomplete, and major portions of the book are now obsolete. Zodiac promised to present the complete text of the Zodiac letters, going so far as to guarantee readers in this book for the first time is every word Zodiac wrote. Not every word. We have lots of letters out there. On page 152, I've got about a minute here. On page 152, Graysmith proves otherwise. When describing the Zodiac's 13th letter, Graysmith claims the letter is reprinted completely here for the first time, yet immediately seems to forget this promise and proceeds to delete the first portion of the text. Graysmith makes other similar omissions throughout the book. Graysmith claimed the investigators had escorted him to the crime scenes to describe how the attacks happened. Despite this assistance, Graysmith's book inaccurately identified the locations of 3 of the Zodiac's 4 crimes. As an amateur sleuth, Graysmith concocted many unsubstantiated theories, including the idea that the Zodiac was killing according to some astrological pattern. Graysmith told readers of the Zodiac that he had finally solved one of the Zodiac's mysterious codes. However, FBI cryptographers stated that his solution was not valid. So that's just in short the beginning of what we're going to get into and some of the other inaccuracies we're going to see. Put it up on camera. Oh, that was earlier. Okay. All right, you guys, that's pretty much it for the end of this week. I wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next Friday. Oh,